Welcome, sir. Well, welcome, sir. Marhaba for you. Now I hand over the session to Janab Ghufraan Sahab. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sir Ghufraan Sahab, please unmute yourself.
Yes, just give me a minute. Just give me 1 minute.
Okay. Well, please proceed.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
A very good morning this Saturday morning to everyone. Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah, 46 people have joined in today. May Allah bless them all. And we'll continue, inshallah, from where we left off with regards to effective lesson planning. Last time we were discussing about the different parameters of lesson planning. We discussed that there should be 2 learning objectives in an Islamic school or any value-based school for that matter, faith-based school, value-based school. One is the skills that we have to teach and one is the traits that we have to teach. Traits is important to teach. It's critically important. Not only the skills. Every teacher in every subject should think in these terms that if I've got to teach this particular subject, atomic structure or history chapter or maths chapter, factorization, whatever. So we have got to think in these terms that these are the skills that we have to teach and what are the traits that we can teach. What are the character building aspects that we can do through this chapter. So this is something that gets integrated in an Islamic school. So we have 2 learning objectives. Then we talked about that we should have, in the lesson planning, we should enlist the teaching methods that we are going to use, the teaching aids that we are going to use, the breakup of the time that we are going to do in terms of how much we are going to complete in every session. And then how many sessions we are going to need to complete that particular chapter. And then how we are going to pre-assess the previous knowledge. And then how we are going to introduce the chapter, what kind of questions we'll ask, right? Based on the existing knowledge, what kind of relevant story we are going to ask, we are going to narrate. Then in terms of lesson explanation, again, what kind of probing questions or what kind of examples we are going to cite, what kind of anecdotes we are going to cite, how we are going to bring about a cross-subject connection in terms of catering to the multidisciplinary educational process. Then we talked about religious and ethical connection that we need to bring about in our chapter, in our lesson, with regards to the relevant Quranic quotations, relevant quotations of the Ahadith, relevant moral messaging that we have got to do. Maybe we might bring in some Islamic historical relevance, right? And these are the things that we need to do with regards to ethical connection, right? And maybe we might narrate some Islamic oriented story, right? From the history maybe, right? Then we have got to enlist what kind of demonstrations we are going to do, how we are going to do practical application of the concept that we are teaching. Then what kind of creative activities we are going to conduct in our classroom, what kind of role plays or enactments we might conduct in the classroom. These are things that we need to enlist. Then when it comes to summary, right, how we are going to summarize the chapter, what kind of creative tools we are going to use to summarize the chapter. Then when we recap, for recapitulation, what kind of creative tools we'll use for recapitulation, right? What kind of graphic organizers we'll use for recapitulation. When we give classwork and homework, what kind of creative activities we are going to give them for classwork as well as homework, what kind of projects we are going to give them. When it comes to written work, there are 2 kinds of written work that we can give them. One is knowledge-based questions. The other is reasoning and application-based questions, right? Because in the textbook, and it happens in Maharashtra, and I suppose in most other state books, this might be the case, that you have 5-10 different kinds of questions behind every chapter in a textbook. Maybe answer in brief, give reasons, smash the column, fill in the blanks, true and false, odd man out. That's it, right? 5 to 10 different kinds of questions. In every chapter, you'll find these kind of questions. But if we enlarge our scope, right, if we include application and reasoning oriented questions, there are more than 100 different kinds of questions that you can enlist and ask the question, train our students upon, so as to enhance their critical thinking. We always talk about critical thinking and collaboration and communication skills and creativity and the 4 C's, and we discuss about these issues. But the question, as they say in English, the proof of the pudding lies in its eating. So how much are we actually bringing that to life? How much are we really making our chapter or the lesson that we are teaching, how much are we incorporating the concept of creativity and critical thinking, right? Using these terms is one thing when we speak about it in an educational seminar, and actually bringing it to life in the lesson that we are teaching is another thing, right? So we must think about not restricting ourselves to the 5-10 different kind of questions that we have in the textbook. There is a huge arena of questioning based on reasoning and application that we can subject our students to, or we can discuss the different kinds of questions, 80, 90, 100, more than 100 questions, if we can think about it, right? And we'll go through some of them in the ensuing sessions, how critical thinking and creativity can be enhanced. Then in terms of lesson review, at the end of the lesson, what kind of creative tools we can use to enhance the creativity of the students, and simultaneously doing the lesson review as well. And assessment. With regards to assessment, what kind of tools we are going to use assessment. This is also of critical importance, right? Assessment shouldn't just be based on the typical questions that I talked about, 5-10 different kinds of questions. Assessment also, the scope can be enlarged to include many, many more questions, many, many more kinds of questions, which will enhance their creativity and critical thinking, inshallah ta'ala, right? So these were the parameters on which we should base our lesson planning. Now, we'll move from, this is all theory. We'll move from theory to practical, because as they say, knowledge is burden without work. In Hindi, they say, Gyan bhar kriya vina. Yani without kriya, without action, without practical demonstration, Gyan means knowledge is futile. So we will look at a sample lesson plan. We'll, in the next ensuing few sessions, we will, obviously we get only half an hour, so the entire thing cannot be done in one session, right? So we, in the ensuing few weeks, we'll go through one particular chapter, and जैसे हिंदी में कहते हैं बाल की खाल निकालना, right? We will, या हिंदी की चिंदी करना, right? So we'll go in detail, minute detail of how we can actually bring a particular chapter to life, and how we can really incorporate all of these terms that we discuss, communication skill and creativity and all of these terms that we discuss, and critical thinking. We'll see how we can actually bring it to life in a particular chapter. We'll take that chapter as an example. And this chapter, I'll take a very simple chapter of second standard of science subject. And I'm taking this as a simple chapter because if I take atomic structure for an example, many history teachers or social studies teachers will not be able to connect. If I take factorization, maybe they will not be able to connect. But this is a simple chapter on plants of second standard, which I believe almost all teachers across the subjects and across standards will be able to connect. The fundamentals, if we understand of how to do it, then we can apply these fundamentals, these concepts to any different subject in any different standard. Obviously, there will be some changes depending upon the subject and depending upon the standards, naturally. Because the different grade levels, we have to use different activities and different styles to some extent. But the fundamentals will remain the same. If you understand the basics, you'll be able to apply in most situations, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll take this as an example. And this is a chapter based on the care of plants. Care of plants. In this chapter, what are the things that are discussed? Right, the different types of trees, the different types of shrubs and creepers and whatever we have in the plant kingdom, that is discussed. Then the forest wealth, what you get from the forest, right? Fruits, flowers, whatever, right? Wood, grass, bamboo, paper, rubber, all of these things are discussed in this chapter. And how we have to take care of the plants is also discussed in this chapter. And the effect of climate on the plants is discussed in the chapter. Then the uses of plants is discussed in the chapter in terms of it being shelter for animals and birds, right? Then the different ways and means of taking care of the plants. How can we take care of the plants is discussed. Then the ways and means in which plants can be harmed is also discussed, as opposed to taking care of. This is discussed. And this is just a 2-page chapter in the textbook, just 2 pages, chapter. And we have a presentation around 100 slides. And in fact, if we go through just the chapter, we have about 80 slides. Just a 2-page chapter has been discussed at length, how to actually do lesson plan, and not just lesson planning, but the delivery of that lesson. What will be the process, right? 80 slides are there. It's just textual, so I'm not showing those slides. It doesn't make any sense in showing purely textual slides, right? So as you can understand, a 2-page chapter is extrapolated and elucidated in 80 slides. So we can understand, we'll go in deep detail of how to actually develop a genuine lesson plan. Obviously, I don't expect every teacher to make an 80-slide lesson plan for a small chapter. That's not practical. I will give in the end a small synopsis of what are the brief things that you can enlist in a lesson plan in your actual written plan, but we'll go in the detail of how to deliver it as well, right? Now, before we move on with the actual lesson plan, I will elucidate on certain terms which we will be using during the extrapolation of that lesson plan. One is ESR. ESR is expected student response. Then the other is UESR, unexpected student response, because sometimes we give probing questions, which is again the it will be called as PQ, probing question. But sometimes we get expected student response. Sometimes we get unexpected student response, because we are not teaching robots, we are teaching human beings and children of human beings. So the process of teaching and learning is very dynamic. So in a dynamic circumstances, we might get responses which we might not expect, right? So this is also to be taken into consideration when you are preparing a lesson plan. You should have that kind of presence of mind. Everything cannot be listed in a lesson plan, because what unfolds in a classroom, everything cannot be thought about in a lesson plan. But as a teacher, if you're going to give thought to your lesson, if you're going to apply your mind, then many things or most things that might unfold in your classroom, you can imagine, you can preempt, right? So the lesson should be taught in an interrogative manner, in an interactive manner, with probing questions leading to expected student responses, which in turn leads to further connected probing questions. Then again, and the process continues, thereby ensuring that the knowledge formation happens with a sense of ownership for the students, instead of monotonous information delivery, one-way traffic from the student. Instead of one-way traffic from the teacher, it should be asking question, getting response, then asking question, then getting a response, and slowly but surely moving towards the goal to which the teacher wants the students to be taken to, right? So it is a chain of asking questions and getting responses, and then further asking questions and taking them towards a particular goal, right? So it is almost like a potential. Now, what we will discuss is almost like a potential transcript of the sessions that you should conduct in the classroom while teaching that particular chapter, right? So the PQs and the ESRs are mentioned in this lesson plan, and we will go through it in detail, inshallah. So the first step would be the learning objectives, as I talked about while discussing the parameters of the lesson plan. The two learning objectives that every value-based school that they should have, one is the skills and the other is the traits. Now, what are the skills that could be taught in the chapter of plants in second standard? We have got to think about what are the skills. Skills are the things which relate to the concepts that are listed in the chapter, in the textbook chapter, which is the kinds of plants, parts of the tree, or the things that we get from the plant, or the impact of plant on the climate, and the impact of plants on animal, birds, insects, and then what harms the plants and the trees, and the ways of taking care of the plants. Now, this is the content, the concept that is there in the textbook. Obviously, we are not living in a society which gives that much weightage to developing traits or character building in terms of writing textbooks. It's not done to a great extent. Maybe sometimes it is alluded to somewhere, but it's not really enough. So, especially with regards to our Islamic dimension, such things are not there, and we don't expect them to be there in the textbooks as well. But we as teachers have to consider what kind of traits or character building aspects we can include while teaching that chapter, and that should form one of our objectives along with the skills. So we narrated the list of skills that are there in the chapter itself in the textbook, but what are the traits that we can include? Meaning, what are the character building aspects that we can include? Maybe the value of plants and forests from the perspective of Islam, the recognition of the creator's creativity in the plant kingdom, the creativity of the creator that is exhibited, that is manifested in the plant kingdom, then not harming anything or anyone unnecessarily as a value-based concept or as an Islamic concept, conservation of resources as an Islamic concept from the perspective of Islam. There are many ahadiths that we can quote. Then compassion and constructivism and introspection, self-introspection with regards to the growing of plants. Yes, motivation of the child to grow plants, planting of trees, right? Because Islam caters to the ecological and environmental concerns as well. Islam is not just a set of rituals. Rituals are very important, no doubt, right? But Islam is much more than just rituals. This is something that needs to be ingrained in the minds of the young children right from the childhood in a subtle manner. Obviously, you cannot get into deep philosophical discussions in second standard, but we need to ingrain in the minds of the children in different subjects and different chapters that Islam has a very wide scope, right? Islam talks about ecology. Islam talks about environmental science. Islam talks about plant kingdom. Islam talks about animal kingdom and taking care of animals, taking care of plants, right? This is something, this widened, large, vast vision of Islam should be inculcated among the students right from the childhood, right? In a very subtle manner, not in terms of any deep philosophical discussions. Now, on the day one, when we start, once we have enlisted the skills and the traits as learning objectives, then on day one, we'll begin with probing questions based on the previous knowledge leading towards the lesson initiation. We should not start the lesson by announcing the chapter. most of the time. Sometimes it might be required, but most of the time we must begin with asking questions related to their practical lives, something that they can relate to in their practical lives, right? Like for an example, we might ask them, what did you eat for breakfast? We might ask the students, what did you eat for breakfast? Right? The expected student response could be omelette, could be jam, could be vegetable, could be fruit, whatever. Right? So from, if they give vegetable or fruit, somebody might give that. So from that word, from that term that you get from the classroom discussion, we'll pick up fruits, we'll pick up vegetables, and then we'll further ask them, where do fruits grow? Where do vegetables grow? Right? And then we are slowly but surely leading them towards the concept of crops and plants, right? Rather than announcing, today we are going to learn about plants. Don't announce the name of the chapter right from the outset. Initiate it slowly, right? Connect with their reality, because breakfast is something that they can relate to, that they can connect to it, right? It's something that most students do, right? But then we should be ready. We might get some unexpected student response. A student might say, today I didn't have breakfast, right? Or my mother is sick, so today I didn't have breakfast. This is something unexpected. This you cannot enlist in your lesson plan. But this is the presence of mind that the teacher must have. Then we might tweak the situation in such a manner. Okay, 2 days before, 3 days before, what did you have in breakfast? Or what do you generally have in breakfast? So don't get stuck, because you might get responses from students which you don't imagine sometimes, because students can think in terms, sometimes can come up with answers and responses that we can't even imagine, right? So when they say what vegetables and fruits and jam and omelette, whatever, pick up what is relevant for you, like vegetable and fruit, then lead them towards fruits and whatever vegetables. And then you can ask them the question, what are the different types of fruits and trees, right? Then the students might themselves respond, mango tree and apple tree and watermelon and whatever else, right? So you're slowly moving towards the concept of trees and plants, right? You didn't directly announce the chapter. You've got to, through the discussion, through probing questions and getting responses, reach the name of the chapter. And then you can say that, so today we will learn about trees and plants, right? And it's already 7:30. So we'll continue with the introduction of that chapter and how we're going to ask questions and elicit responses. And we'll move with the chapter next Saturday onwards. Jazakumullahu khair. Wa akhiru dawana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Alhamdulillah, Janab Ghufraan Sahab, wonderful motivation session. Really, it is inspiring for the teachers regarding your mentioning of the skills and traits and knowledge and application. Alhamdulillah, new things you have learned from you today, that ESR and UESR and PQ. And apart from that, the thing that you reminded us about that Islam is not teaching only about the rituals, but regarding ecology, environment. And this reminds me the ayat number of Surah Imran, Rabbana ma khalaqta hadha batila. Allah has not created anything in vain. Really, it is an inspiring session, sir. Inshallah, we will continue with you in the next session, next week.